Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Without Context podcast. This is week 2 of Haley being away, so Deca and Sharky have control. And today we bring you not only one, but two guests. We have Luke, the DM from the Game Room on twitch.tv, and we have Devin Young, Mr. Piratechnics, right here as well. He's sportscaster and content creator for the DMs Guild. But I'll let them introduce themselves a little more, and we'll start with Luke here at the top.
Sure. Hi. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. So I am Luke the DM. It's my job to kill everyone. I'm currently the primary DM for we call it a West Marches style game, but it's kind of something that's grown into something unique at the game room. We've got a rotation of at any point between 20 and 30 players currently, and always growing and always expanding. We play every Thursday night, and it's been a riot. So it's kind of a very unique style of DMing. It's definitely its own animal. So I'm excited to chat a little bit about it.
And links for all of that will be in description as always. And we'll move on to Mr. Devin here.
Hey, yeah, I'm Devin Young, or if you follow me in the esports space, Piratechnics is my stage name. I write modules and adventures and player supplement stuff, just kind of like whatever I feel like making on the DMs Guild, and now going forward on Drive Through RPG. And I also run a campaign on the Casters and Castles channel called Covens and Cauldrons, because everything has to be alliterative and start with a C,
Yes.
which is Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign, with some homebrew elements and some unique archfey beings. It's I think it's like my third or fourth campaign, and the first one I've streamed start to finish, well, hopefully to finish. So it's been an interesting experience. The style is a little bit more narrative focused, as there's not necessarily as much combat. Except my players are killing a lot of things, so maybe I messed that up somewhere. I don't know.
I always do.
Well, building on
So
a
the Wild Beyond the Witchlight is like very unique in that you can just go through it and not get into a single combat encounter.
and
At least they give you
building
stat
on
blocks. I
Yeah.
mean, like I feel like it's my fault because I say roll initiative a lot, and I think the implication is you have to kill stuff then, even though you could just be like, "Whoa, let's talk this out," and that's your turn. I don't know. I'm still learning.
but building on what Luke said earlier about killing players, I do have a one dead character count on the West Marches game.
Oh, oh
But
no.
he died as a bard would die
He
and got
died
sucked
a
by a
true-
succubus.
Yep,
So
yep.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean that's
As
expected.
bards are want to do. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
But I have been in there in sessions where a lot of people have died. So
That's very
death
true.
is a normal thing, it seems. Now I just hope my kobold can make it more than 4 sessions.
We got this. We
So-
got this. I believe.
And I think I saw your post about it on Twitter today, Pira. Silver bestseller now for the Cryptid Codex? Or was
No,
that,
it's actually it's for the Night of the Lucarian, which is a murder mystery one shot. Yeah, we just passed the I believe it's like 101 sales. I made that last summer, I want to say, so it's been like 6 or 7 like 6 months. Yeah, it was kind of my favorite piece to work on because it's like very like pulpy, like The Mummy meets like Clue, and I love like one shots like that you
Sold.
can just drop into anything.
It sounds
And
good.
it was a challenge, right? Because it's like it has to be balanced for like level 10 ish characters because there's a mummy lord. Spoilers, but you know, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a tweet about that. I couldn't remember if it was the Cryptid Codex or one of the adventures, but congrats on getting it to a silver bestseller.
Thank you. That means a lot.
What a flex it is to be like, I'm just gonna spoil my own module. I don't care.
I mean, like,
Sure.
the cover is like it's very Egypty, and my artist, Shay Dryce, does like this really amazing, like stylized, like everyone NPCs, and they're all like Scooby Doo characters. So if you didn't think there was going to be some like mummy shenanigans going on, like I feel like it should be pretty obvious.
And also a nicely priced module too. I think it was a $1.95, or is that the Cryptid Codex? I think
Cryptic Codex is $1.95. That one's at $2.95, I think, and every once in a while it goes on sale because DM's Guild does that.
yeah,
Yeah, I
pretty
mean
nice
it's I
priced for
try to do it
an
by page.
adventure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I try to do it by page count because it's only about 16. I might revamp it at some point because there's lots of cool stuff that I hadn't thought about that people said would be good. Also, my cat's being naughty. I'm gonna go grab him really quick.
You think
round 2 with the cat.
round 2?
Mine disappeared. I don't know where he went. He's
Yeah,
not
he was
working.
like, all right, I'm done with the table. I'm out of here.
I'm done with this. I'm gonna leave now.
All I see is him grab a cat and then something being thrown across the room.
Here, I'm so sorry.
You're good.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
he knocked something over, and I knocked something over trying to get him down. I'm gonna turn off the camera for a sec. I'll be right back. I'm still
It's fine, we
listening
can-
though.
It's fine. We had to cut in our previous episode because Deca had to go get pizza from the front door because nobody else wanted to go get it.
Nice.
But,
I want to know I am on the complete opposite side of where the front door is to get to the pizza.
But so I guess what we'll do when he's back, hopefully with cat in hand, we'll just talk about everybody's preferred DMing styles, or if they have a
Sure.
history with other styles first, what makes it stand out to you
Okay.
individually, and then maybe go back into some of our older episode topics that we've done for the podcast. You know, favorite characters you've played, handling stuff at the table like romance between players, which I know through the game room there is a lot. There
Yeah.
is romance between characters, and
Yeah.
when something happens to one of those characters, it is something that like the whole server feels it for a few
Yeah.
days.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a good topic to get some other DMs inputs on, because we had that episode that we talked about
Yeah,
it.
I was checking out your guys' video list there, and I was like, oh, there's some juicy topics in here.
We literally just like throw
Pretty good ones.
is without context because we don't have a set theme. We just kind of throw something at the wall and
I
talk
love
about
it.
it that
I love
week.
it.
Oh, I like that it's like I remember like in the writers room that is the Discord chat that we have for all the other hosts. We're just like, it's Sunday. We should probably talk about what we're gonna do on Monday. And then just Monday comes along and we're just like, shit,
And I-
gotta come up with the topic now.
I just sit at lunch on work and I'm like, so do we pick a topic for the day? So, but yeah, we'll just wait for Pyrrha to get back, and I'll do some cut magic here and get him
Edit
back.
in post. Edit.
you gotta do the
We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
The dirt is mostly vacuumed up, and the cat he's in jail right now, which is the bathroom.
Cat timeout.
Yeah, we put him in timeout sometimes, and then he sits up on top of the shelf and just like stares at us. We call it the toilet guardian.
All right.
he
Well,
looks at you
since
like, how
we
dare you?
since we're all are back now, you might have heard during the break, the first topic we kind of wanted to talk about here. Everybody's preferred DM style. Is it homebrew? Is it published? West marches or more linear? What attracts you to that style, or what attracts you to doing homebrew or using a published adventure as a backbone? So with our guests, we'll start with Pyrrha. I know you're running a published adventure right now, modified slightly. Is that a normal thing for you, or do you prefer more fully homebrewed adventures?
So I'm a relatively newer DM. I've been running campaigns, I think maybe since like 2019. I ran my first, which was Fandelver. I tend to start with an established world most of the time, because I find it's a little bit easier to build up, and then I try to find like homebrew elements to add to it, especially because most of my players inevitably want to do something homebrew, so I want to try and tie that into the world. Um, so it's kind of a mix. Like I do have my own homebrew world that I started a campaign at the beginning of the pandemic with. That's still ongoing, but I kind of hit a little bit of an eject cord because I realized I didn't have enough world building there. So I ended up turning it into a Curse of Strahd campaign that then became a Ravenloft campaign because Van Richten's guide dropped, and I'm like, there is so much I can do. And right now my party is like at like a grand masquerade in Dementlu. And like they're doing it to try and get an artifact that's going to give them some power over Strahd. So like it's become this whole grand thing that's way beyond what I even originally envisioned. But I'm keeping track of what's happening in the regular world while they're stuck in Barovia. For those of you familiar with the demi-planes of dread and all that. So the short answer is yes, I do both. But I usually start with an established campaign. Right now, Wild Beyond the Witchlight is what I'm running for Covens and Cauldrons, but it ties into the greater world of the Casters and Castles multiple like campaign universe, which is called Anakra, and it was created by the the guy who runs the channel Tormented by Gnomes for a lot of his campaigns. So it ties into it, but because it takes place primarily in the Feywild, there's a lot of leeway I can get to do all sorts of things. I like to have the flexibility, really, and I would like to do my own full homebrew at some point, but I think I need a little more experience to do that.
So you do the style kind of more of a sandbox where you have this established world, and then depending on what your players want to do, it's one of these existing adventures, slightly modified to fit whatever spice they want to put into it.
Yeah, it's a sandbox. There's usually a lot of routes that lead to somewhere I would like to go, but only if it makes sense, right? I think it's really important to get your players on the same page as fast as you can. Session zeros are really, really important.
Very important.
Yeah, like for Covens and Cauldrons, like it's a bit of a railroad esque adventure because you end up where you're going to end up. But the route to get there can be any number of ways, and the players can make unexpected decisions that's going to change the outcome. So I tend to favor more of a sandbox style because I really like letting the players go in whatever direction that appeals to them. But following preset campaigns, there's only so many directions you can really offer. And if the players want to do none of them, that's when I start pulling things up out of thin air and trying to do a little more world building. Some of the DM's Guild stuff out there is really useful for that, by the way. I definitely want to shout out. I need to get the actual link, and I can maybe give it to you to put in the show notes. But there's a module I've been using called Within Brigand's Tollway that does it really expands like the Harengun, the rabbit folk, and like their whole like bandit hideout thing into like an entire actual like mini adventure that my players are currently invested in. So there's lots of stuff you can use to expand things that aren't in like the regular adventure, and a lot of really talented people working on stuff like that.
Yeah, DM's Guild does give you a lot of stuff. There are people who are publishing like add-ons for existing adventures, like Descent into Avernus. I know the first week or so it was like, here's a bunch of encounter tables, here's a bunch of more depth into some of these locations if you want to do it. You just have people who are just pushing out mountains of just third-party supplements for a lot of these published adventures. So
yeah.
It's not bad. It is always good having a published adventure as kind of a backbone to build off of, especially if you are a more recent DM. How long have you been playing D&D through any edition?
I'm definitely a 5th edition convert. It's not technically my first tabletop game because I think when I was working at Riot, I think we got a group together to try and play World of Darkness, but like it only lasted a session, and I didn't really understand the concept of like tabletop role playing. Also, it's not as straightforward. I think I got into D&D. I was overseas in Shanghai, I believe, in like 2018, and I had a friend who was also another commentator who had like a group of other like expatriate folks all getting together and playing. We played Tomb of Annihilation, I think, and I only made it.
Start with.
Yeah, it was a little interesting. I made like a half orc druid who was like a stoner, basically. Like that was his whole thing. He was just like really chill because I didn't really know how to role play, and I'm such a talkative person. I'm like, I want to just like be this like goofy chill guy. And the first thing my DM did that like really impressed me was he full on rule of cooled the dinosaur race bit by letting me turn into like an Allosaurus, which is like beyond the challenge rating I should have been allowed to do because we didn't have a dinosaur to enter in the race. So my character literally was the dinosaur, and we were being and he was being ridden by like our gnome rogue, and it was like the coolest shit ever. So from that moment, I was like, I love this game, and I want to do way more of it.
That's awesome.
I had a
second place, by the way.
I had a DM who was doing Tomb of Annihilation. Was like, hey, do you wanna just like guest as one of the NPCs in this game? I was like, yeah, sure. So I was Voltap Gedarn also on the race, doing the race because I was he was advertising his book. Volo's got and I was disguised as a half elf, disguised self half elf, and I'm writing, and I just completely get wasted because the players have to come first. And at the end of it, he's I'm like, all right. So the half elf gets up. He's like, he pulls out a book. He's like, everyone, buy this book. It's so good. And they just tackle me and escort me out.
No pushing of merchandise.
I do think some of the more vibrant NPCs that are established are really fun to play around with. Yeah,
Hmm.
Bolo's a good one.
All right, Luke.
So I've got a fun twist for you guys here. I have never DM'd a like pre-written module.
Ooh.
Neither have I.
For
So
some reason I really struggle with it. I've tried running like a Curse of Strahd sort of thing or Lost Mines, whatever. Um, but when I read through these and I can see, the flow of it and everything, for some reason I have a really difficult time role playing as a character that I didn't conceive. And so I think in my case, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons back when I was like in high school. So like 2011, and absolutely loved it. Got a bunch of my buddies together, and I think we kind of did the thing that everyone does when they first start playing is you just kind of dive right in and really don't pay attention to the rules and just kind of have fun and be goofy and role
Yeah.
play and make up your own things as you go, and it's all just a load of silly goofy nonsense. um but I think that really attracted me, that concept of like creating something and then just constantly expanding on it. So I actually started, bit shameful, I started with 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, which, it got me introduced, went back to Pathfinder a little bit, which was, a lot more hardcore. There we go. And then, fell in love with 5e just because I think it's the perfect combination of that sort of, like, number crunchy grittiness, but also, like, ease of access to players, and you're not sitting
yeah,
there looking through this flow chart of how to grapple. It's like, it flows nicely.
I have
Um
3.5 players that ask me about grappling all the time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
or flanking.
I have to keep telling Sharky when someone gets up from prone. No, that's not this game. They don't
Yeah.
get attacks opportunities.
yeah. Because I was
Uh,
playing in a Pathfinder campaign for a bit, so I was getting really used to that.
yeah.
So,
But, yeah, I think, so I've run a lot of, just sort of homebrew world, like narrative linear campaigns. I tend to, when I'm like designing a campaign, I think the way I kind of conceive it is I have these like big cinematic moments, and you have like 5 or 6 of these, like, you almost theatricize, like almost cutscene video game type moments, and you try to string those together into some sort of cohesive plot or narrative, and then it's just kind of trickling the breadcrumbs to try to get the players to those particular moments, and obviously they'll veer off and you kind of have to try to, not necessarily railroad. I think I tend to be personally a bit more of a railroady DM as opposed to like a sandboxy DM, but in general you kind of try to, I create the illusion of choice where, oh, it's like
that's
that
Yeah,
meme of
that is
like
left
that
path or
is
right
rule
path.
one.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
rule one of being a DM is the illusion of
Yeah.
choice, but also making sure your players are having fun with that illusion
Right.
of choice. Because if you're
Absolutely.
starting to feel like, all right, he's pushing us towards this,
Right. Then
then they
it's
know it's like it doesn't matter what we do, we're going to end up there anyway.
yeah, and that's a tough
So
balance of trying
Yeah.
to
yeah,
let your
I
players have agency.
I really like that bit that you mentioned about like the cinematic moments because it kind of sounds like storyboarding, like a TV show or a movie or something,
Yes,
where
yes.
you have this one point. Obviously, there can be a million ways to get to that point, and maybe they'll even happen out of order, which I would argue is like less railroady, right? Like it's you still have a point you want to hit for the narrative, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to happen for the exact reasons that you maybe thought of in the first place,
Right.
or even in the right order. And you said you're more of a railroady DM. As a sandboxy person, I'm never planning more than like a few sessions in advance at most. Like I have a general outcome for the pre-written stuff, but like overall, I'm kind of just like I'm looking at like potential scenes that could take place like that session, and if they don't happen, I'm like, cool, out the window. And sometimes a session is just a full shopping thing where the players just love the weird goblin NPC that has a full on like Cockney accent and just wants to sell them junk, which has
what's
happened
the
in my
I
campaign.
love it.
what's the
Um,
joke? It was like, what's the joke? It's like you walk into a bar and you walk into a tavern and there's like a hooded figure in the corner, and one of the players asks, "Is there anybody else in the bar?" It's like, "Yeah, there's a goblin. His name is Boblin." They're like, "I want to talk to
I was
Boblin."
talking to
that's the
Boblin's
DM's fault for
Goblin.
giving a very compelling
That's
name.
X.
Bob.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
that's on
just
them.
it's just one of those moods. Like
Yeah.
as a DM, I keep posting it in our Discord for the game that I'm running. I'm just like, God, being a DM is so hard for you guys because like I'm trying to like make these like challenging but balanced like fights and all that, and then it's just like one thing I didn't account for just like leads to that scene
Shatters
of the
everything.
Justice League animated movie of Green Lantern just getting beat up by the three parademons, and I'm like,
I-
I
Fly
can't plan for
speeds.
this party.
Fly
Like,
speeds are brain breaking. I can't handle them. I can barely make battle maps.
Give everyone Earthbind.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that happened. Yeah, one of my big bads recently, big bads. He was like a mini boss kind of character. He hard failed a hold person, and I'm like, well, there goes this fight.
That sounds familiar, Sharky. Would you
Yeah.
like to talk about it?
there's a moment I'm going to talk about when Luke's finished about
Yeah.
my Dming Style and what I have to do for the party of collectively 10 with 11 characters, because you run 2. Because what I did was I ran 2 campaigns of 4 to 5 players, and then I realized each of these campaigns are missing something. And then when I thought about joining them, I realized that one party's backstory was the perfect fit for another character's like conflict. So
Oh,
it all
there
just
you go.
tied together better and gave me a more understandable like plot line to move forward. So I'm having
You're
to
a
balance
masochist, is what you're telling me.
well, a few of them don't play all the time. We have two.
Okay.
We have 2 players that usually aren't around to play. So most sessions, at most, it's 8 players. But they, Deca and the rest of them, have played long enough to understand like one player doesn't control the table. They all find a good balance, and I don't have to kind of police the players around to keep things in order. So
We,
thankful
we
for
also
that.
have
But
we also have a bunch of like role playing channels so that we can get our
Yeah.
fix there.
so between sessions, if they want to do like in character stuff and not take up session time, because we only have 3 hours a week to play, they can just
That's
do
really
that during
cool,
the week.
actually. That's a really
And,
cool idea.
because we're kind of hopping around the story right now, so there's a lot of downtime technically between everything. But back to Luke.
yeah,
So
that
we can,
sure. So I've got, basically I found myself can't get enough of D&D, you get that fix. So I found myself DMing a bunch of different mini campaigns, and a lot of them fizzle out after 5 or 6 sessions, and a couple of them stick around. But what ended up happening for me is I ended up running a couple like multiple year campaigns and ran them in the same world concurrently, and they were kind of different, isolated, and there'd be the occasional nod or wink to something that happened with the other person, but they were separate enough plots. But in that process, and I think the players really contribute this with their backstories and their ideas, and you kind of pull little pieces and incorporate it into this larger world, is you end up with a very, very wide and fleshed out world with all of these different cities and factions and political regimes and everything. And it was right around early pandemic, actually, just about 2 years ago, that we decided let's crank this up. Let's open this up to a West Marches style thing where I have this established world. I have a lot of NPCs and history and locations to draw off of. So it kind of helps with a lot of the improv stuff. Um, and the beautiful part about it is as we get more players, every single player has their own backstory, their own ideas, and so you're constantly just kind of tacking that on and expanding that world building. And so we actually have a world anvil site with articles on every character and every location and everything. And so if someone wants to come in and just dive right in and learn everything there is about the world, it's this nice, neat, organized thing. Um, but kind of going back to what you guys were talking about a little bit, just managing large party sizes and everything, with the West Marches campaign, it's interesting because we've got, at any given time, we've only got 5 players in a session, but there's 30 players in the roster, and all of them have interweaving backstories and relationships, and so you're not necessarily playing with the same people every week, but you might run into those people every once in a while. And so I think that we have this, we call it tavern chat, the sort of text-based channels just for role playing when you can't get your fix if it's not your week to play or whatever. I think that helps flesh out those intercharacter relationships a lot more. Because sadly, in a West Marches campaign, and we stream on Twitch, we've only got 3.5 hours to play or so, and so there's we're very mindful of the screen time. We don't want to keep people up till past midnight playing D&D on a weeknight or whatever. So you kind of have to, it's like herding cats, just kind of keep them moving and keep the plot flowing and the action flowing to not only finish your sort of self-contained little mini one shot of a session, but also keep the episode side manageable for the audience as well. So I think it's really helpful to have those options for role playing, um, because I mean, what's D&D without role playing, really? And I think I try to manage expectations and I think a big part of that is just treating everyone equally across the board, being fair to everyone, not playing favorites, not giving out special treats or anything, but also the balance of making every player feel special. I want you to enjoy this game, I want your character to feel like a badass, I want you to enjoy this. So it's how do you do that equally and fairly for everyone, and also how do you manage your time, because if you got some players that just love it and want all of the attention, and you got some players that are like, yeah, I'll figure it out. So it's, you got to kind of go on the seat of your pants and figure it out. How do I make this work for all of these players? And sometimes you have to be a hard ass. Sometimes you have to say no, because some players ask for a lot. But
And unfortunately, you have to enforce previous rulings upon newer players,
yes,
even when you learn that the ruling initially was wrong.
right.
We had one specific event was the Finger of Death spell that
Correct.
that killed one of our player characters because the wording of it is weird, and
Correct. Yeah.
you had to rule it the same way as you did the previous encounter that I guess killed another PC.
Right. So I had like
So
a
there was this
year
brief
ago. Yeah.
there was this brief argument. We said, we have to rule this the same way. It's only fair to rule this the same way.
Right. And
So it's
I think once it's kind of laid out like that, it
far
is
more
what it is.
accepting
Yeah.
of it. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, this is how we're going to be wording it going forward, just so we know now as a group, we know what to expect if this happens.
Yeah, and I think it's important as a DM to kind of have that humility to recognize, like, yeah, wow, I totally misread that. I misinterpreted that. I messed up. And being willing to admit that and potentially retcon things and that sort of nature. You got to be flexible and open to that sort of thing. I think when you're DMing a campaign with all these different types of characters, but I think once you have sort of these hard precedents set and locked, it kind of becomes the campaign canon, so to speak, going forward. Like this is how we're going to rule it. And I think to try and kind of pin down or write every single possible thing like that is challenging, but you kind of go with the flow and kind of keep the big ones you'll remember for sure, like a Finger of Death spell.
Killing a PC, like a
Yeah.
Finger of Death killing PC, you're going to remember what ruling you made on that, and it's going to be
Right.
easier
Yeah.
to be in that situation
Yeah.
again and be like, here's what we did last time. Like, we have to
Right.
do it this time.
So when you whip out that spell for the third time, the whole party knows, like, oh shit, no, this is
Yeah.
for real. Yeah.
Gird your loins.
Yeah.
That's so hard to do, and sometimes you just break the game. I broke my DM's game once as a wizard, and you can probably guess with which spell, because I fireballed a whole room of people. But it was, in fairness, somebody was trying to duel me, and none of my party were helping, and we ended up having to retcon like an hour because basically we just derailed everything entirely. It's so hard. It's so hard to give that level of attention to everybody in like a 3.5 or like 4 hour session. Like I
Right.
struggle with that so much, and I always am like trying to review player backstories to be like, okay, what kind of like dream or like message from their patron or something can I give them this time? Like what kind of cinematic moment can I give them? Or like knowing that this character's backstory is relevant for this session and how I'm going to work that in. Like it's such a challenge, and I really like respect how much work you like, just from the way you're talking about it, how much work you like put into doing that for like a revolving cast. That's even more difficult.
The thing I think that makes it, I guess, a little bit easier for the game room doing it is a lot of the sessions are just self-contained, like one-shot stories. Like there is an
Right.
overarching plot to it, but I could go in as my kobold and it's like, hey, we're going into this basement to clear out this infestation of space spiders, basically. And like the next campaign, it could be like, hey, we're doing some Indiana Jones shit, and that's just where the campaign. That's the job we're hired to do by the
Right.
people hiring us. So
Adventure
it's
of the week style, yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah,
that format, we've got the formula that works really well of, okay, we have, your introduction of problem, initial encounter, role play, problem solving, second encounter, resolution, reward. It's
Yeah.
kind of like this stepwise thing. And
You got a flow
then
chart.
yeah, and then there's these sort of like little threads and little plot hooks that, if you want to just sit and play and watch this one episode, you can do it. But if you're in it for the long run and you've been paying attention for the last 2 years, it all kind of builds up to these big cinematic moments. And occasionally I have, these sort of large plot episodes, I'll call them or whatever, where it's kind of like I think it's important for the DM to have fun too. I think
Yeah.
so I kind of like
Absolutely.
say, everyone, this session's for me. Like let's be real. This session's for me. I'll pick the characters that I think, most kind of respect
This is
that.
my
or they're-
season finale binge watch finish.
Exactly,
Like y'all
yeah.
are the actors. I mean,
Right.
that's what a D&D campaign is in a way,
Right,
right? Like
right,
it's like the DM's
I'm the
only one.
director.
Yeah.
I
I
think
knows
that
everything.
I think the most recent, I think that big player death with the Finger of Deathspell was actually the season finale before Christmas break
Actually
that
was,
you guys
yeah.
took.
Yes.
So it's like mid-season finale, just this
What a
beloved character
cliffhanger!
dying. Yeah, I was like,
You
I even
killed
said that after
somebody right
session. I
before
was
Christmas?
like, this is a straight up mid-season like cliffhanger, isn't it? Like, and it just sucks because I for the short time that I was there, I was only probably in the group for about a month at that point, and I knew
That's
that
true.
character was like beloved. Like I would see it in tavern chat, just like she was so loved by everybody,
Yep.
and then it just goes like in a turn, just gone.
Yeah. That was one of these moments that changes an entire campaign. Like for everyone, for the entire Heroes Adventuring Company, like that's a game changer.
Yeah,
And
because she knew stuff. Like from what I could tell, like
Mhm.
she had the information to what we were pursuing, and
Correct.
she is now gone.
Right.
So,
And so that's also, in this West Marches style, every mission gets these little tidbits, these little nuggets of information, and we have these text-based channels. We have these tavern chats where people can share that information in character canonically and kind of build together. So even if you didn't watch last week's episode, but you read it in tavern chat or whatever, you can kind of put the pieces together, and it's almost this like collective theory crafting. And sometimes I'm just like, yep, they're on to me. Or sometimes I'm like, man, they're way off, but that idea sounds cooler. I'm gonna steal that, like
that's rule number 2 of being a DM. It's like, wow, that idea is so much better than the one I had planned originally, and then you just like
Well-
write down a new note. Like,
what was the meme about? Like, I think it was like the Thor Ragnarok thing, like the behold my stuff, except it's like this is like behold my homebrew, and it's like thing that the players said 5 sessions ago, like favorite pop culture items. It's like this is the homebrew. It's just an
Yep.
amalgamation of everything I think is cool.
I think it's I think Matt Coville, one of the big D&D personalities on YouTube, says good DMs borrow, great DMs steal.
I was just
And
about to quote that. Yep.
It's just the best D&D campaigns for homebrew are just plagiarized. Like it's just a bunch of plagiarism.
It's fair use. You can't
Fair
copyright
use.
a campaign,
But
except wizards, I guess. But whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up something about the West Marches style, and that's the player buy-in that comes with it. The sessions, the players that do it, they get a specific point that you use in your system for a variety of things, and you can spend enough of those points to get a personalized like backstory mission, right?
Right. So as part of this, and to try to kind of reward people for being consistent and playing, and I also not just turn into like a player killing machine. We have these things called tea leaf points that you can spend as basically like a luck point. We use them as almost like a DKP system, like old school World of Warcraft style, to bid on magic items that drop. And also, like you said, if you save up a certain number of them, you can get your own personalized backstory mission. You get to pick the players that come with you. And we've been doing those for a while now, and they're some of my favorite. And that's where I really get to sit down with the player individually. I set up a time for Discord calls, and we just talk about, what do you want out of this backstory? What kind of vibe are you feeling? What kind of session do you want to have? And it's amazing what players will bring you. Some players just give me like almost like a script of, I want this to happen. I want to fight this monster, and then this guy dies, and then and I'm like, beautiful. You did all the work for me. Thank you. Save me some prep time. And other players are like, I don't know. I think it'd be cool if there was like a fairy or something. And I'm like, all right, got it. I can take it from there. And it's
The monkey's
really
paw.
yes, it's so fun to like work with as little or as much as a player wants to give you, and really give them that special, this is your moment. You design encounters that are, based around their character's abilities, things like that. And even some of the backstory missions that have happened, I'll tie in like a little bit of my own, like your backstory actually connects to the main plot line sort of thing, which is always a really cool way to make those characters really highlighted and feel special. Um, and I think those tend to be some of our more popular episodes too, because people are interested in each
Invested.
other's characters, yeah, and they're
People are
invested.
very
So
invested because I mean, in tavern chat, you're in character talking to this other character. You're becoming friends. The community is becoming friends with each other, and it's like we're gonna help this guy, do something for his past. Let's go. Like,
right, it's like hell yeah, let's go. It's yeah, it's really cool, and as part of the backstory missions, I also give them custom artifacts, almost like I don't want to call them vestiges, but I think that's kind of the idea of like a
Vestige
single
like.
weapon that sort of evolves with you. So as you unlock more backstory missions, your artifact will get powerful. They're not necessarily all weapons or anything. They can be spell books or necklaces or whatever. But it's really fun to also like talk to a player and be like, okay, so what do you feel like your character's missing? What sort of abilities do you want? What sort of, what kind of cool magic shit do you want to do? And I'll let you do that. And that's a really cool way to, you know, mechanically combat flavor wise, also let those characters feel special. So you try to hit it with the role playing side and the mechanic side too.
and
I do like that the aspect of like how you're mentioning like, and you again, I just want to point this out: 30 people that you have to do this, that you don't have to, but you do this with because either you like their characters, you like the person, or whatever the case may be. It's very impressive, and I want to you know
well,
that is extremely
that's a lot.
impressive.
it is impressive,
A
and
lot.
it is impressive, and I know Luke's not the only DM. I know that Weewoo, I believe, also does
That was my second
DMs.
question. You keep saying we.
Yeah. So, I've had co-DMs before. Weewoo is also sort of co-leader of the game room. He is sort of my tech guy because I know absolutely nothing about streaming, but he kind of gets the stream set up. And occasionally we'll switch where I will manage the tech side and he will DM and everything. And so that's kind of cool where he just kind of has his own continent to the north of my main focused area and does his own thing, and they're very very loosely connected. There's like tiny little mentions, but it's almost like like Age of Exploration India
Yeah,
versus Europe kind of vibes, where it's like there's definitely communication between the two regions, but it's pretty minimal.
You have to
um
take a ship there, and it takes like 3 weeks.
Right, exactly. So and we've had guest DMs before. We've had, DMs that have tried and didn't really work out. And I think one of the I would love the idea of having more DMs, I think, and it's it's exciting to have my world just continually expand and have people contribute to it. But I think it is a challenge just because of the time crunch, because of, the limited format that we have being a
yeah,
Twitch streamed game. So it does require like a bit of I don't know, like
finesse.
a finesse or like a technique to it. And sometimes you got to know how to, politely but firmly kind of
Move
edge
the party
players
along.
along to
Yeah,
keep it moving. Otherwise, because
You have
you
to have
let
the discipline
players,
yourself too, right? Like
yes.
Yep.
yeah,
like my instinct is to just like kick back and let the players do things, but when there's a clock, you
right,
have to push things forward, and it's like so hard to like do it without just being like out of character. All right, y'all need to like move, unless it's like
right,
combat and they're taking like 2 minutes over their spell book. But
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's hard to do. It's
I
and
think
with
that's
so many different
just
players.
I think that's just player etiquette, though. Like knowing what your spells do, knowing what your abilities are. That is mostly the player's responsibility to
yeah,
understand how to play. The DM can answer questions, but he's not there to know your character sheet.
right. And with the West Marches game, we advertise it as a beginner friendly game. We want to encourage people to come and try D&D for the first time and see if they like it. And so, but there is a, like you said, there's a balancing act. The players do have a certain responsibility where it's, you need to do your homework, you need to be prepared, and we're there to guide you. We're not there to memorize your character sheet. And we've got players of all different experience levels, and I find that a lot of the more experienced players actually help out a lot of the newer players a lot too, which
Yeah.
definitely helps take some of the pressure off. But it's such a rewarding feeling when a brand new player tries something for the first time and like casts that spell for the first time and it's like, whoa, that worked, and then you see them kind of falling back on those old reliables that
You
they
see
like
the
discovered.
love. You see the love starting to enter.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason you want to do like that. That's what 5th edition is so good at, right? It gives you that moment as a player of like, oh, I can do this cool shit. And like you had to like think about it and like come up with a creative way to do it. You're not just like a superhero from minute one, but if you like plan something out and it's crazy and it works, it feels so rewarding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I've
And
got
as a DM, it's like, oh yes, my babies are growing up. Like that's how it feels to me.
I've got one player who is relatively new. I'm in a couple other games with her, and she's playing a wizard, an evocation wizard, and like her signature spell is Gust of Wind, which to like an experienced like power gamer kind of
It's
like
like
number
what that doesn't
like,
do a lot.
yeah, like Gust of Wind, cool. It's a 2nd level spell. That should be like a cantrip. But like the creative uses that she's had for this spell and like the game changing way that she like Avatar: The Last Airbender like wind tunnels a bunch of enemies out of the way. It's like so cool. And like every time she casts it, I'm just like, you go, Willow. Like, let's go. That's so awesome, you know?
I have a tangential story to the spell Gust of Wind that was just told to me last night by somebody who's been playing D&D since I believe 2nd edition. 'Cause Gust of Wind is a spell that makes a gust of wind, of course. This player back in 2nd edition, the way Featherfall specifically was worded is that it made you as light as a feather.
No, I can already
I
see
know
where
So
this is going.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know where this is going. So they cast Featherfall on a rock. You know, the big bird thing. Cast
Oh,
Gust on it, splatters against the rocks.
that's super clever.
That's 2nd edition for you, baby.
Yeah. Physics
Um,
are very weird when magic gets involved. Even in
Oh, yeah.
5th
Yes.
ed though, like ugh.
What's the
Oh wow.
what was the question in Discord? It was like, hey, can't we just like teleport around? Wouldn't these cities have like teleportation circles? And I'm like, don't make me consider how magic like this would affect everyday life in this world. I don't want to think about that.
In fairness, that's Atlantis, the most technologically proficient place in in your world. So
One more thing before we move on
yes.
to Deca. Talking about this actually might probably go to like an hour and a half based on the time we have already talked
Oops.
about. The thing with published adventures is that they're set for a level range. You know, some adventures 1 to 4th characters. This adventure is meant for 5th to 9th level characters. The West Marches style that you do is if you come in, you're level 1. That's it. But you could also be going on an adventure with a level 4 and a level 3. And the combat encounters have to be balanced for that party disparity.
Yes, and that's
So,
probably the most
some level
difficult-
ones don't make it.
That's probably the most difficult aspect is balancing encounters and like that. And like especially, when I have little baby level ones, I tend to like very, very easy, simple rats in the basement kind of missions. And I think it's fun to see players almost take those protector roles. Like, these are my children, I will not let them die. I'm a level 4 fighter. They got a little level 1, wizard. Yeah. But yeah, I intentionally broke up these sort of level brackets into those tiers. We have like beginner tiers, level 1 through 4, adventurer tier is 5 through 9, and then next tier, when no one's reached that yet, is hero tier, where we have 10 through like 15. For a couple
Almost
reasons,
like Adventures League.
yeah, I did take a lot of inspiration from that. But I think number one, it just helps make balancing encounters easier. But number two, I think especially for new players, when you come in with your little level 1 character and your 2 spell slots, and if you were playing with someone level 8 casting these crazy spells, kind of makes you feel a little lame. It's like, well, I'm kind of getting carried. Like, I don't feel like I'm contributing. But if you kind of crunch those, party sizes into more similar levels, then everyone's, contributing like a level 2 versus a level 3. It's like, they're still making an active difference in the mission. So that's
They can
that's
cast Magic Missile, I guess.
right.
It can't miss.
Except if they shield. Then it can miss.
We don't talk about that.
I give shield way too willingly to my players. Like,
I mean,
every campaign.
I have an
I'm a
Arcane
fighter.
Trickster Rogue. I have an Arcane Trickster Rogue, and like I took it, and then I realized that my feat, which is Defensive Duelist, is completely useless unless I want to just save a spell slot.
But let's move on to Deca. I know you run games. Or is it Dire Bear? Is that the?
Yeah. I don't run games for Direbear. Every now and again, I'll be like, "Hey guys, who wants to play in this weird one shot?" Because so what I tend to do is Direbear. I love them. They play almost exclusively 5th edition. And all the worlds are unique enough that you're not going to get the same thing in every single game. So like the Monday game is like this Industrial Revolution-esque European area where like the magic exists, and there's this group of people who go and investigate mysteries that are magic based. My Tuesday game that I play Star Wars. Star Wars the RPG from like 1987.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
It's all D6s. It's easy to play.
Oh yeah.
On Wednesdays is another 5th edition game, and so on and so forth. But I like being that break in the 5th edition on Tuesday. But anyway, as far as like me being a dungeon master is concerned, I've probably out of everybody here, I've probably run the most different systems. Because I've run 5th edition. I've run Starhold for Sharky's birthday that once time. That was fun. I've run Monster of the Week. I've run and this other RPG that I'm going to posit to all three of you actually. That comes from the people who I don't know if any of you are familiar with Drawfee. Drawfee, they do like they're like artists. They do different artist challenges on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
I've just seen the name, but it's like very like vaguely escaping me.
Yeah, they used to be part of College Humor. Anyway.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah. So they Jacob Andrews from that group made a tabletop game called You Awaken in a Strange Place. And when you guys were talking about like world building and coming up with a concept for a game, You Awaken in a Strange Place is actually just perfect for that because you just let your players do it. The first 30, 45 minutes is like you create the world. Your players create the world based on an adjective, a genre, and a location.
Nice.
And that's what they got to go on. And then they make their characters. They make their characters based on action verbs, which can be pluses or minuses depending on which one you're going to pick. And then the GM is given 5 minutes to make a story, and then you have the story. And that's the one shot.
Sounds really fun, although I would have a massive anxiety attack in the DMC.
I've run that.
I always over prep.
I've run that game twice for Direbear. It is just it's really fun to watch what the players come at me with, and sometimes you get some really cool stuff like some incident in the past, toys have grown to the size of people, and I'm like, I can work with that. And sometimes in the same game, they're like, there are no restrooms, people have void diapers, and I'm like, all right.
You're like, all right,
Weird flex, but okay.
How do I do this?
I don't is what I decided on. I don't do it. Everyone just has one. It's fine. But I do like I would say my DMing style as far as like 5th edition is concerned is very like lackadaisical. Like I like to let my players feel empowered to do what they want to do. Unless they give me a backstory where their backstory is yeah, I lost my memory as a teenager, go nuts. I'm like, all right, well now you're wanted for murder.
The fun players where they're just like, give me something ridiculous.
All right, Jason Bourne.
Wish granted. That was a fun little arc where it's like, oh, you've been in Waterdeep for a while now, and the family who's pursued you, it was a hunting accident, so you like accidentally killed somebody. That's fine. But the trauma, memory loss and all of that stuff. And
like playing Dick Cheney, like
yes,
it's just.
Why am I 70 years old and where did I get this suit?
So just one day they just knock on the door like, is Will Blair in here? Yes. You're under arrest for murder. What? That's right, in a session.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
I'm very good at doing those cliffhangers for my players. They're like, what does that mean? What did you do? Like, I didn't do anything. You did it.
I think when it comes to our group, the group that I run for, I get like the simple backstories. Like Alvin's hey, I want to be just a guy in a suit of armor with a weapon who was trained to like hunt demons. And I was like, I can do that. And I'd like tied him into whatever. And then it's a backstory for our character Gwen, where it's like I probably won't even be able to touch on like the first like paragraph of her backstory, and I just kind of went with like the second half of it because I was like, I don't think we're ever going to get to that part of the world to explore that. So gonna just kind of grab what I can out of all these backstories and put them to this plot here. So
Whatever you can use for like the moment, right? Like I have so the campaign that I'm running, that I've just been running not streamed, that started in the home world that became like Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. All the player backstories relate to the home world. So the fact that they're in Barovia is kind of weird, but one of the players is like a very like Trevor Belmont like vampire hunter, so that works. So I've sort of like tied that in, and how like Barovia used to exist in like my world's prime material but isn't anymore. And like for the other characters, like one of them is from like a distant continent that's like kind of not as like interconnected as the one that they started on. And like their whole backstory was they like accidentally murdered their child, and got expelled from like their society. And their whole redemption arc at the end, if we ever get there, is going to be like going back and figuring out why that happened. And I've been feeding like little like dream bits and information, because they're like a were tiger, and the way I'm playing it out is that they're, spoilers if y'all are watching, don't wait till after this.
You're-
They're like the lycanthropy is actually like them sharing a soul with this other like entity that's like a tiger that was placed inside of them as like a demon's punishment, effectively. So like the end arc is going to be like them fighting a rakshasa or something like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. If
That
we
is
ever
really
get there, I
cool.
have all these little breadcrumbs of like, after the main plot, after Barovia, if you all survive, here's things you can do to clear up. But like if people don't want to chase that, then it's fine. Like I just give them the option. So like leading it up is a good way to see what kind of pieces people are interested in, right?
it's laying out breadcrumbs and seeing what's taken.
What
And
happens when
seeing totally different direction too.
I was gonna say,
I do
what happens
love
when
both.
you're like the party that Sharky has, where they just we take every single breadcrumb,
And
every
we
single
will keep
one.
playing until everyone is happy. Yeah, that's
Just like World of Warcraft, just mass quest turn-ins. Just
Yeah.
pick them
That's
all
what we
up.
do.
Yeah. I thought
What's
about doing like
the
a mini arc until everybody's like backstory is complete, right? Like I actually like, I feel like this was highly influenced by me playing Octopath Traveler.
when is there anything else you'd like to add, Deca, before we
Um. So as far as like you guys were mentioning the balance between like modules and like homebrew content. The first module I ever finished start to end was Storm King's Thunder. I put enough homebrew in it for it to fit into my world. And the idea is that it's Storm King's Thunder as the plot goes. You know, you start in the town's attacked by giants, whatever. But it fits in my world. The only exception is that the most offensive name in the module took them out. It's bad. It's a bad. Pao Ming is a bad name.
it's when
It's
you
a
look
bad
at
name.
modules, sometimes it's like we can probably change that.
Especially the stuff that's a little bit older, not even older editions,
Yeah.
just like early 5th edition, where you're like
Pao Ming is from 2016. Come on, guys.
yeah. Well, Curse of Strahd, I mean, they made a whole, they revamped it because their version of the Romani is pretty stereotypical, and I immediately changed all of that. Thanks hugely to the Curse of Strahd subreddit, by the way, because they have an insane amount of like homebrew changes that make NPCs and plot lines and everything way more interesting. And that's like one of the most popular modules, but like, yeah, I mean, everybody's biases creep in, and that, wizards are no exception.
Yeah. I
Yep.
think that was one of the things I saw about the like reprint edition of Curse of Strahd. It's like, hey, we've added this whole section changing around the Vestani, I think they're called.
Yep.
Something like
No,
that.
no
And,
shade at Wizards. Don't buy it. Just go to the Curse of Strahd subreddit. Way cheaper and way more rewarding.
But it's like I'm happy that they went and did that, though. I'm happy
Yeah.
to see like that
Yeah.
growth. And moving forward, like they're talking all this stuff. It's like, here's this creature, typically evil, instead of this is, if somebody's reading this book for the first time, they're like, oh, this has to be evil.
Yeah.
And like those
Final
changes to
Essentialism
like
never made sense. Like
yeah.
like I remember reading it when I first started doing D&D, and I'm just like, well, that's stupid. I'm just gonna like give them more.
I'm
Like,
simply not going to.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I threw a party of goblins at my players at like level 1, and they killed them. And then one of my players was like, "But what if they weren't actually evil?" And in my DM brain, I'm like, "Oh, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make things more complicated." And that's
Have
why,
like a note from their wife, like,
yeah,
I got dinner when you come home, honey."
yeah. Well,
What was
that's
the
just mean. But I mean, like, yeah, like the whole like this entire race of creatures is evil. It's like, if they're like
Yeah.
Kind of
mindless
bad.
monsters, it's one story. If they're like even vaguely intelligent, that feels so reductive. And yeah,
Yeah, I think in terms of changing with the time for D&D, like the Drow needed it the most. It's like, hey, we're not going to make this entire race of dark-skinned, evil, god-worshipping elves. It's like, let's not do that. Let's make it a little more black and white. Like,
yeah.
let's say that there's some sects that aren't, following law. Let's say like the evil ones do follow law. So now you have this more, honestly, complex society now.
Well, I really
Where
like the way it's done in Crit Roll too, right? If you watch like campaign 2, it's
Mhm.
really focuses on these like Luxon following dark
Yeah.
elves, which is like a way more interesting concept because it still encompasses the Loth stuff, but as like a people that were freed from tyranny effectively.
Right.
Yeah. And you have that in my game, Deco, where it's like, hey, you guys go to the Underdark, and it's like, oh no, Drow, and they're like, yeah, we'll help you out. It's just like no questions
Yeah.
asked, and it's like, oh,
We were just
okay.
chilling with the Drow.
Yeah.
My character hated it because he hated being underground without the stars, but I mean, it was still cool. The Drow were nice. The food was good.
I'm gonna talk about this whole thing of the prep that you had me do for your character in that campaign, because I'm like, hey, I have this. So when it comes to my campaign setting, I stole everything. There's steampunk England, there's conquistador Spain, there's Gothic horror Germany, there's Renaissance France, and it's basically a world map. It's an actual world map, but I found one that had like 3 additional like continents on it, which is supposed to be like Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, the 3 legendary like lost lands. So I was like, okay, the elves are going to live on Atlantis because that just fits. So so I had like all these settings, and it's like, hey, this one shot's going to be on this little island to the south of Atlantis, and Deca here is like, hey, I want to play this turtle character, and I was like, I don't know where I can fit him. He's like, I'll give him kind of like like a Maui kind of aesthetic, and I was like, all right, let me design this whole other part of the world real quick, so I can get this like turtle society like figured out.
I helped you.
You did, but it was just like, here's Europe and like Atlantis and like this whole thing. And he's like, I'm gonna make one all the way over here. Like,
Whenever you have a map, your players will want to go beyond that. They want to be on the edges,
oh no,
so-
I screwed up that campaign because when I was running the 2 campaigns, one of them was taking place in America on the world map, but it was an area that was unexplored by the Dominion, which is Europe. So I was going to have like the whole like frontier land and meeting the native species there and all that, and setting up a new place to live. And then like 3 sessions in, I'm like, let's go planar. And I completely like moved away from that whole campaign setting to something else. I've been trying to course correct ever since.
It's the ultimate ripcord. That's why I did Barovia, because it's like, can you not handle what's going on in your current plane of existence? Just zap the players somewhere else.
Off to
Yeah.
the Beastlands with us.
Yeah, off to the Beastlands. But when I was about what's probably 17 sessions into one of the campaigns and like 20 something into another, I was like, I'm missing something from these campaigns. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna go on break for the holidays. I'm going to combine these 2 campaigns together. And then I was like I was rereading like backstories and stuff, and I was like, this fits. Like, this is the piece that I was missing. Like, this whole thing with this character is like the perfect like catalyst for everything, and everything else ties in so much better with this new related individual to that character like being the center of it. And when it comes to stuff like the West Marches game, where everybody has their backstory, but it doesn't directly affect what's going on until a personalized mission or a backstory that ties into a pre-existing module in some way to kind of give it that character a reason to be there. A lot of the campaigns that I run or have ran in the past, never finished. This is hopefully the first campaign we're going to finish. The campaign story is intrinsically tied to all of these characters. Like they are directly related to the events going on through whatever means in their backstory fits the best. And the easiest way for me to do that was everybody's backstory has a person they hate. All those people are working together. So let's just nip it all in the bud right now. All of these people are working
You
for the
Legion
big
of
bad.
doomed your players. Okay.
You really did. That was a really cool fight
Yeah.
that session. We pushed a dude out of a 2-story
Yeah,
window.
so I'm gonna get onto that real quick. So we talked about the whole like cinematic like set pieces. Like a lot of the campaigns leading up to these big like chapter enders are your basic like, you know, there's something here, it's an encounter, story progresses a little bit through like a social encounter, it's whatever, it's something against a undead or some animal or something that I've made. But then we get to these like big cinematic fights. And I was like, all right, I'm going to bring back this barbarian that was wronged by one of our characters in the past. He's like working as muscle now for these guys. And the main enemy of that session was our character Gwen's abuser. And that's the thing, is like you have to talk to your players about stuff and like their comfort and all that and like what's good for the table. And you don't want to like just spring something onto a table not knowing.
Content warning's super important, also for fans, right?
And that's the thing, when we're talking about her backstory, I asked her, it's like, how do you want me to play this guy when you come across him? And she told me, it's like, if you can make my skin crawl, you're doing it right. So I was like, all right, so I have your okay, you know, we'll do this. And it was definitely like a good for her like session, like ender, like, all right, you know, she handled it, her past is cleared up because this guy's gone now. But I'm like, all right, I'm gonna introduce this barbarian's back, he's gonna be the muscle, it's gonna be him and this like fake oracle, and abuser like fled the room like a coward. And I was like, all right, let's go. It's 4 against 2. And this guy, you know, I homebrew a lot of stuff. I don't really follow the book. Like I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna give this guy, you know, this proficiency, he'll get these saves, he'll do this just to kind of throw something together. And I made the mistake of putting windows in a tower. So I forgot that my friend who is playing a pugilist, which is a homebrew class that I found, it's basically
like a strength monk.
It's like a strength monk. He's like a street like alley boxer. One of his abilities is if he hits you, he can move you like 5 feet or something like that.
Jeez.
That was the crusher feat.
Yeah, the crusher feat. So yeah, it was one of the feats he picked. So they just moved this guy to the window and like punch him out the window, completely nullifying the fight. And I was like,
hey, did they see a body?
Okay. Yeah, there's a body.
I was gonna say, because there's no body, you can always come back.
But it got better because once that fight ended, the big bad showed up on an airship fleet that they were unaware of and just started like bombarding this city that they were in. And I made it so it's like you guys had to run out of this like monastery tower you're in as it's like collapsing with this ship like coming through it, because one of our players is like, I'm gonna jump on the ship and crash it. So, and that's the thing, it's like you have this whole like set piece, like no match, just, you know, give me rolls, like I'll describe what's going on. It's like the party like fleeing this like collapsing tower, like trying to save their friend from this airship. And it was this whole like
almost
big died
again.
And almost died again. The man has a urge to die, and I'm trying to get him to stop. But and I was like, all right, you know what? I learned. I'll figure out something for the next fight. And it's like, all right, we'll go to the next fight. A few sessions later, that character's cousin shows back up. Not even related to he was related to the main story. He was hired to bring back one of the characters because the big bad is that character's mother, and she's trying to resurrect a dark god. So he's like, you and I were hired to bring them back, and you're not doing that anymore, so I'm going to have to do it. And I gave him charisma saves, I gave him wisdom saves, and I gave him con saves. And I'm like, all right, that handles most of the spells. First thing out of one of the, can you ever make me an int save? And I'm like, he has a 0 modifier. Like,
that's why you gotta have
like,
legendary resistances, man.
I was just like, all right. I was like, what's the DC? And it's like 16. It's like, I failed. And fucking mind sliver, so incapacitates them for a turn or something like that. And it's just like, this man, I kind of alleviated because it was 1 against 7. So I gave him 3 turns in the initiative per round. And he just lost all 3 of those rounds. And I was like, oof. Okay, I have a fallback. his attacks heal him. I can get some health back doing that, and draw this out a little bit more. First attack he gets coming out of incapacitate, he misses, doesn't get the heal, he just doesn't survive the next round. And I'm like, I can't plan for you guys because everything I do consider there's something else. Like, but
You're-
it's just one of those things where
You're
it's like,
re-
you know what, I'm just gonna take it as it comes. Just learn from this.
you're really gonna have to make like literally another Legion of Doom situation.
Well, the thing is, I don't want to give every named enemy you all come across like legendary resistances or like mythic actions where when they hit 0 they come back for phase 2 or something like that. I don't want to like draw the fights out like unnecessarily. But it's just like, what's the third rule about being a DM? No plan survives first encounter with the party.
First contact with the players. Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to the monastery fight because you mentioned that Gwen's abuser, and one of my favorite things about that fight, and I know you were like, I'm afraid this fight's going to be underwhelming. I'm really happy with the way it turned out as somebody who's has watched this backstory develop.
Yeah, I built him up to be this person in charge of a monastery. He was not following to that god. He was following a dark god. He was corrupting it from the inside. And I was like, these people don't deserve like any kind of specialness to them, these kind of characters. So but I was worried too. I'm like, they're going to get to him and he's just going to be a guy. He's not going to have combat abilities. He's not going to have spells. He's just going to be a guy. And I was like, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I just don't want them to be disappointed in that, But it wasn't. She grabbed him and blighted him and did all of his HP into the maximum from 0. So she just straight up killed him. So I was like,
but there's something so satisfying about that
it
too.
It was.
Yes.
And that's what she was like. It felt satisfying to do it. So,
and at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Is that the players are able to get the satisfaction, the closure. As long as you've done a proper amount of setup, even if it feels abrupt, I think it's fine, right? You especially have to be careful with those like squishy, more like humanoid but not powerful, but like socially powerful characters, because you want to give them all the lead up and like the illusion that they're like hella protected, and then when the players actually just full on disintegrate them in one round, it's like, oh, they weren't physically powerful or magically powerful, they were socially powerful.
Yeah, it was just it was the power dynamic. She was when she was younger, she was just like a student there, and he was like the one level to be like the guy leading it eventually. So
I do think that's a powerful story, because I don't think all of your abusers have to be like these Briarwoods where one's literally a vampire and the other one's trying to bring back a dead god. Like, they don't have to. They can be just a guy.
It's just awful people.
Yes.
Just awful people.
Yeah.
And going back to something that Luke had said, doing the backstory missions, you give them like an artifact or something, kind of like a visage or something that kind of give them that empowered like kind of feeling to them.
Yeah.
What I do is with certain moments of campaigns where it's deserved, all my campaigns, I like the characters being tied to a deity of some kind, and I give them a boon from that god. It's a unique ability, sometimes multiple uses, but a very like thematic feel to what that god and that character embodies. With our character Gwen, she is an oracle, so it's an oracle class. She can set up like the D20 rolls and adjust players' rolls if she wants to. So I was like, all right, you're getting your boon from your god for doing this, so you're going to get another dice for free because you have to use points to like get those rolls done. And as a reaction, she can now make somebody, as a reaction per round, she can make somebody roll with disadvantage, kind of like influencing that like she's a student of the god of prophecy kind of thing. And the one that are during that monastery battle when it's collapsing, our Azamar, just a cleric who has recently joined the campaign, has never dealt with anything of this magnitude. She was literally there for like a post-grad study from the cleric school. without hesitation, like sprouted her wings and flew through the rubble to catch this tiefling warlock that was falling off the airship because the guy was just crazy. And her ability now is being the cleric of Pelor. When she heals you, for your next turn, your attacks deal an extra D10 fire damage as like your weapon like ablazes with like Pelor's like blessing. So the thing is, like, she's always healing you, so you're just always going to have this like flaming weapon to use from it.
That's super cool.
Yeah,
so I try to like
the fanatic stuff is extra dope to like tie it into the world and make it feel more alive with like all these gods' influence.
Yeah, because the overall plot right now is there's this woman who's trying to bring back an entity, an ancient evil entity. It's been speaking to her for years, just like, hey, bring me back. It's not a primordial and it's not a divinity, so it can bypass something set up in the world called the Primal Edict, which prevents gods and primordials from influencing the world directly. So these entities have to like choose a person to fight this battle. And it's like, hey, Pelor's chosen this cleric. The Raven Queen has chosen this warlock. You have to stop this woman from doing this. So I'm really just kind of making them feel like big damn superheroes before they get to this like final battle, probably against some like ancient evil semi-divine entity. So they're gonna need it.
Oh yeah.
Me, who can literally be invulnerable for a turn, I'm still gonna need it.
That's the flip side of like, I always hear the argument about like, some DMs are really cautious about like how much power they give their players, and I try to take the approach of well, the more power I give my players, the tougher enemies I can throw at them, and then I just like modify all the stat blocks.
I was just about to say the same thing.
I know
my players have never fought rules as written Strahd, for the record. Like, he shows up a
love
lot
that.
and slaps them around. They have never like full on just like I have given him so many spells because there's no way in the 9 hells that a 400+ year old vampire lord has like these 8 spells. Nah, he's got everything if he wants it.
I found a supplement that somebody made where they took these powerful entities, like they've made gods like a stat block, and they made like, here's better Strahd, where it's like a CR like 23 Strahd instead of a CR like 16 in the book. So it's just
you were talking about levels and like how adventures are planned for like level whatever to whatever. My players are past the end of Curse of Strahd level, and they still haven't even like done like all that much of the plot. Like, I mean, they've done a fair bit, but like some stuff just didn't happen or happened without them. So like I'm just I'm setting up for like a big cinematic battle or something.
We lost Luke's video.
Oh no, I can see him.
I can see him.
I can't.
Sometimes that happens.
Why is it's showing up on the recording though? So I'm gonna have to slap.
I was gonna say it's important for Sharky to see it because he's recording.
It's the most important one. So sometimes if you just like flip the video on and off a few times,
or do that.
Rejoin.
That worked.
That's a bit weird. Yeah, that worked.
Yeah.
I have the recording software with like the overlays, so there was like a thing where Pierre was just split by the two borders. But it's fine. Technical errors.
You guys were mentioning like stronger Strahd. I gave an ancient red dragon the Eye of Vecna, so like,
oh god,
I have that stat block if y'all want it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I like to keep players guessing, especially if you do get some of those like, I don't say like power gamers, but like more experienced players that have maybe run through a module before, or like maybe are familiar with something.
Yeah.
And then you just see that look of surprise when they do something that's not in their original stat block, and you're like, yeah, that's right, I modified it.
Yeah, I know that as more of my players start to get their boons, like building up to this final battle, because there are still a few characters that have to get some closure to their story. I know that any baseline enemy I throw at them prior to the end boss is probably going to get run through. So I've come to accept that at this point. I can only hope that the final boss makes up for it, though. So
I'm excited.
Set the stat block, and it's like 3 columns of information.
Yep.
Ooh. Every time, whenever there's a mythic actions column, I'm like, all right, buckle up.
It's just like, all right, so got these 3 pages of abilities here. This is
Yep.
phase 1. I have this other stack here for phase 2. But
To be fair, yes.
yeah. I
That was it.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at I was like looking over the boons that I had given them, and I was like, one actually kind of sucks, so let's buff it a little bit, knowing that it's detrimental to me in the long run. But I was like,
Such
I
a
was looking-
struggle.
okay,
You have to
they've
balance. You have to balance being the player's cheerleader and also like, how do I take them down?
I was
a
like,
peg?
they've been playing this campaign with me for 2 years. We're like probably like 3 or 4 months out from the finale, so why not just? I'm not going to hit level. We're not going to hit level 20. They're probably going to end the campaign around level 12 or 13. So I need to make them feel
Aw.
like they're in that higher tier though.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I'm not gonna get
Especially
rapid
if they're-
reload for Salvador.
yeah, but
Epilogue.
because it's like if you guys end at 12, I'm looking at like what people get at like 13 or 14, and it's like an important
attacks.
ability. Like with the Oracle class, it's at level 14 they get the ability to use their dice against an enemy instead of just on their team. And I'm like, she's not going to reach that, so let's give her this boon that kind of gives her that feeling though of it, where it's like, hey, you can just impose disadvantage as a reaction on something rather than trying to use the dice. So it's like, I don't want to rob them of like the full feel of their class, but so it's like, I know we're not going to make it to that point by the end of this. So, but yeah, this has been a great talk, guys.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's been
Yeah.
nice.
It was
It's,
fun. Thanks
it's
for having
really
me on.
cool to have. It's really cool to have all of these. Like, we're all pretty like-minded, at least as far as we go to like tabletop, and and it isn't so like-minded as it becomes like an echo chamber. But it's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about when you talk about that.
What I really
Yeah.
wanted to do with this is get the different styles in. That's why I went to Luke. I was like, he runs a West Marches style game. He's the only person I know that runs a West Marches style. So he'll have some good input on that. And then we have Pira, who runs Published Adventures, fairly new DM also, which is good to have because me and Deca are kind of experienced. I've been playing since 2006, and I started with 3.5. So and I've gone through 3.5, Pathfinder, 4th edition, 5th edition.
I'm a baby, man. I'm stretching out. Like I've been like trying to get like either World of Darkness or like a Call of Cthulhu game going because every campaign I run turns horror anyways. So
Yeah.
I was actually gonna say that's one of the things I like about the Tuesday game for Dire Bear is that we've played Vampire the Masquerade, we've played Scion 2nd edition, we've played Esper Genesis, which is like 5e in space.
Yeah, it's just space 5e.
It's just space 5e. And
It's
then
just the same rule set, just different like space stuff.
There also isn't a barbarian or a bard class, or there wasn't the last time I checked.
But there's a space tech equivalent.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
Yet.
I have it. I need to read it. I have a bookcase of systems that I have yet to play.
Same.
So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have. If I go upstairs to my book, it's like I got Call of Cthulhu. I got Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition that I haven't run. I've played in Pathfinder 1st edition. I got Cult, Divinity Lost, which I want to play, but that is definitely a game where you need to have players that know what they're getting into. And you have to have
I got the Dishonored RPG, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I have so many books to read before I get to it, but it's so exciting because I love this weird steampunk shadow magic bullcrap.
Yeah, Cult is a whole different monster though. It's like intended for mature audiences. Like the themes in it are definitely something like I need you guys to tell me if you're not cool with some of this before we get started. So it's a game that I want to run, but I just don't know if there is anybody to run it with. Because I like to push myself as a DM also when it comes to stuff like that.
Same.
Can I run a game that has this kind of stuff as like a core concept to it? Do I feel comfortable enough running that? Like I can run it fine as a number, but can I like feel comfortable doing that kind of story and describing stuff going on and stuff like that? It's definitely like a test of like, all right, where is my comfort level for me?
Because you're limit testing yourself.
Because this D&D game, we've had like abusers, we've had like children being kidnapped and experimented on. We've had like a bunch of family drama, and all this other stuff. We've had like very real like things happen, but it hasn't really like pushed anything like further.
Wait till you get
So-
to my family drama.
This is Deca came to me with his character idea. He's like, I want to play a baby boomer elf that wants to make Atlantis great again. And I was like, so you're a gunslinger, right? So,
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a gunslinger elf from Atlantis trying to figure out how to get his trying to figure out how to get his continent out of this like slump that has been in for centuries.
See, when you
So-
say it like that, you make it sound like he's a shitty person, but he's actually pretty good. I did. In fairness, have a on my Hero Forge. I just had like a concept that's like Boomer Elf that sat there for like 3 months until Sharky was like, "Hey, I'm running a game. Do you want to play?" I'm like, I'm using that one.
Sometimes it just has to metastasize into like the right thing. I have like 3 or 4
Yeah.
like Hero Forge characters that have just sat there. I have no idea what they are, but they're gonna be something at
Mhm.
some point. I did get to play one. I got to play a surprise tiefling himbo who's also a wizard, and he doesn't realize he's squishy because he's like a farm boy, and he just like found a spell book in the attic that was like his grandfather's.
half
my
of
God,
our
so it's
that's
like-
awesome.
Yeah, like this is really cool, and I'm gonna go do stuff. And he's actually got a high strength score, but he's a wizard, so it doesn't matter.
half of our male cast in this game are playing low intelligent, just himbo characters.
It's an archetype. It works.
We
and
have-
you don't have to be a barbarian to do it.
We have the pugilist and a justicar who are built like fridges, and they're just like the most polite guys. And then we have this who we call the bisexual disaster tiefling warlock. So it's
That you have
just-
to have.
Yep.
That is also
And, like-
probably extremely androgynous, right?
No, he's pretty
Yeah.
male leaning, I believe.
Okay,
got- he's
well,
got-
that,
he's got
that's
the-
a trend.
He's got the boyish good looks.
But it was funny
Ah,
because
maybe.
his cousin was the one that got hit with the int save. And we're like, Gwen woke up and
okay.
realized that the Rose family was fucking stupid. Like, they have all the charisma, but they're fucking stupid. And I was like, it tracks. Like, I guess it tracks. But I guess we'll call it there, guys. I
Yeah.
appreciate Luke and Pira for coming out tonight and taking
Yeah,
part
thank you
in
so
this with you.
much.
I would love to get you guys back down the line if we have a topic that we think you might enjoy talking about. Definitely
Bring you
an
back for
esport-
esports.
Definitely an esports
Yeah,
episode.
we'll do the
bring Pira
crossover
back.
episode for sure. Set me up.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. And for our audience, as always, I will put the links to both of these guys' stuff down in the description. Links to the Game Room Twitch, links to Covens and Cauldrons, as well as the DM Guild site. Definitely check out some of that stuff. But yeah, this has been the Without Context podcast. If you guys have anything you want to leave on, give a shout out to anybody.
Thanks for having me to all y'all, and may all your rolls be crits.
Oh, I like that.
The only thing I have, Sharky, what episode are we on?
27. No,
Alright.
28. I don't know. I've actually decided I'm just going to stop saying the episode number because every time we start with the episode number, we have to double check which one we're on.
You have to. Never mind. It's fine.
One of those podcasts.
It is one of those podcasts.
Yep.
But yeah, thank you guys for coming out. As always, I am SharkyHat, and I'm joined here by Decavolty, and we will see you all on the next episode. See you guys later.
Bye.
Doodles.
Bye.